happy icy Friday. Hope everyone's staying safe and warm as the roads continue to thaw. Thanks for being with us today. My name is Ashley Jones. I'm with the Venture Center. And since we're near the beginning of the year, I want to reintroduce the Venture Center to a few of you. If you're new, first, welcome. The Venture Center is a nonprofit entrepreneur support organization. And we educate, collaborate, and accelerate. And what does that mean? So our goal is to connect entrepreneurs with other entrepreneurs, creating that community, providing you with that educational piece, using other entrepreneurs and subject matter experts, and really growing that community of entrepreneurs here in Arkansas and removing barriers for entrepreneurs as well. So thank you for being with us today. We've got an exciting workshop for you. We've got Ms. Kelly Carney. She's the Vice President of Human Capital and Chief People Officer for the Southwest Power Pool. So we're excited to have her with us today, and we'll learn a little bit more about her in just a moment, but want to talk through and give you an overall idea of what today's session will be about. Want to start this off with saying we do want this to be interactive. And so while Kelly will provide lots of tips and tools and tricks for you, we want you to ask questions using that chat feature down at the bottom. You can raise your hand and we can unmute you if you have a question you'd like to talk through. You can also use that Q&A function down at the bottom as well. So be sure to pose your questions there. We'll keep up with them here, also on Facebook. But today's workshop is going to focus on one, hiring your first employee. We see a lot of solo entrepreneurs coming through the Venture Center and other entrepreneur support organizations. And hiring your first employee can be really scary. And it's a very critical decision as well. Those first few, it's really important to get it right. So we want to talk about hiring your first employee. And then as your business grows, how do you bring on those additional folks that can help grow your business? We're going to talk through some onboarding practices, some best practices when it comes to bringing on those employees. And then how do you evaluate performance once you've got some people in place? How do you measure those results and make sure that they're performing and hitting those targets and goals that you have for your business? I want to thank our sponsors. We've got Frost Accounting Firm, the Little Rock Regional Chamber, Simmons Bank, and Wright Lindsay Jennings, of course, who are all in the state and support entrepreneurs and support all of the community programs and things that we provide to those entrepreneurs. So thank you to all of them. And one final note, we do have some upcoming programs. If you're familiar with the Venture Center, you know that we provide several of those throughout the year. Our next one is scheduled for February 9th. That's next week. We've got a fireside chat with our friend Olivia Farrell. She is the founder and former CEO of the Arkansas Business Publishing Group. So if you're interested in learning how she got that started, how she grew it to what it is today, you're encouraged to register for that. It is a virtual session from 6 to 7 p.m. on February 9th. Yes, Molly just dropped that information there in the chat. So if you'd like to register for that, you can do so there on our Facebook page, any of our social channels, and our newsletter, through our website. And also I want to bring everyone's attention to a program that just launched this year again, as well as Ventureship. This is a monthly mentoring meetup for entrepreneurs across the state. And we're encouraging folks to apply to be a mentor or a mentee. Again, this is a monthly meetup, and we're actually really seeking women mentors. We have a good mix of folks in this first inaugural cohort this year. We're constantly looking for other mentors. So if you are yourself are a woman business owner with some experience and you're looking to give back, we encourage you to apply to be a mentor to this Ventureship program. It's a low commitment. We meet once a month as a group, and then you're encouraged to meet with mentors or mentees inside that program outside of those monthly meetings. So we're looking for a minimum of 2 hours a month. So if you can contribute that and are a woman business owner or any business owner looking to give back, we encourage you to do so there. Okay, with that being said, I want to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Kelly Carney, and let's talk all things hiring. Take it away, Kelly.
Great. Thanks so much, Ashley, and thanks to the Venture Center. I think it's always hard when you're a new business owner or a small business owner to try to figure out all things HR. So I'll just give you a quick look at my background and then jump into some of the questions that Ashley had posted on the site about what we were talking about. So my background has always been human resources. In college, was one of those students, didn't know what I wanted to major in, and took some career placement testing, and it was on the wheel. If you wanted to go on the social side, you could be a social worker. If you wanted to be academia, like a guidance counselor, if you wanted to be on the business side, HR professional. So I'm like, sure, that sounds good. And did an internship. I graduated from the University of Kansas, and they required that you do an internship. So I did an internship in the city of Lawrence, there at the time personnel office. And really that's been my career ever since. So I worked all varieties of sectors and industries and all sizes of companies, probably from about 50 employees all the way up to a home health company that had about 10,000 employees. Currently, I'm working for Southwest Power Pool, which is a regional transmission organization. So in these cold days, what we do is we're the kind of keep the reliability of the grid going. So we have an operations center. We have member companies, utility companies who join our association, and we kind of keep the electricity balanced between different types of energy, and are monitoring that 24 hours a day. And sometimes we switch to coal, sometimes go to wind, those kinds of things. So anyway, that's what we do, and very interesting organization, as you can imagine, very technical, lots of engineers, lots of IT professionals. They kind of are the air traffic controllers of the electrical grid in the states that we're in. So that's what I do. And I'm launching a number of kind of human resource initiatives there. But the most important thing, I think the Venture Center has hit it on the head, is hiring people. That's the most important and the most challenging thing to do. And so thinking about this group, and I'll just have a couple opening remarks, but then really want it to be very interactive, and questions that you have is, how do you decide when to hire and how to hire and who to hire? And I think you have to start with, what is the purpose of your business and what are your strengths? So if you're very entrepreneurial, like I'm assuming that most of you are, it may be that the first person that you hire is someone on the finance side. It might be someone to help you with sales. It might be someone just to handle day-to-day kind of operations. Most organizations will hire like an HR professional, around 50 to 100 employees, because there's a lot of laws that come into play once you get 25 to 50 employees. And so, and if you're growing, that person can kind of help you in the hiring process. So I would just tell anyone listening in that in trying to figure out what kind of employee to hire, first of all, think about, if you're creating a new job for someone, you want someone who really can tackle a new position, not someone who is maybe used to just having someone tell them exactly what to do, right? I would imagine that most of you would want someone who can show initiative, who can take that job and grow it. So on the performance potential scale, you might be looking a little bit more. You certainly want the skills, because you're adding that, but you want to look at potential for the future, and thinking about what the value proposition is for your organization and what you're looking for. And it's hard when you don't have, you don't have a full-blown company behind you, but there's a lot of ways that you can figure out how to make the hire. So for example, let's say you think, I want to hire maybe an accountant, someone to do my books. Well, a great option for someone who hasn't hired someone is to go to like Monster or Career Builder and search for those jobs and look at the job postings and say, okay, yeah, those responsibilities, I think I want someone to do that. So I always suggest to everyone, no matter how you do that, build a job description. So here's what your job is. And if you're going to create more jobs, here's what those jobs will be. So start with something elementary. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but start with the job description. And a lot of times job postings on Monster or Indeed or Career Builder will all have in that posting, it's basically the guts of a job description. So I think that's always the best place to start, to be clear on what you think you want someone to do. But I also think it's good in the interview process, if you find someone with a different skill and you want to modify that, feel free to do that. But Hiring people, though, is very tricky. So I think in hiring the people for the first couple employees that you have, you do want to look for potential. You want to look for ability maybe to grow and take on new things. You might look for flexibility. You might look for adaptability. And again, if you just do a quick Google search on interview questions, a lot of behavioral type questions you can ask people about their experience with that. Past behavior usually predicts future performance. So, but you also want to make sure that they're a great cultural fit or a cultural add for your organization. So if you're very entrepreneurial and marketing driven, maybe you do want to look for someone who is a little bit more process driven or introverted, or whatever it is that something to complement versus someone just like you. So always thinking about diversity, and diversity is not just age, race, all those kinds of federally protected things. It's also differences in personality, different experiences, different backgrounds, that they can bring something new to your business. So, I think that's really important. I think it's also helpful to create and I'm sure most of you have created a business plan when you started your organization. So think a couple years out and what positions you might be adding. So looking at that organizational business plan, our organization has 600 employees, but you hit different phases of an organization. And so, I think your first couple employees is one big phase. Once you get to around 40 or 50 employees, that's another big jump. 100, and then each kind of 100, I think it prompts you to think differently about your organization and the structure. So those are a couple things to think about. I also think you look at a new employee bringing into your business. So that's your baby, bringing someone into your business. How can you make that mutually beneficial for both you and for your new employee? So gone are the days where you just post a job out there and you'll have 50 people apply and you'll just be able to pick from that and they'll be lucky to have a job. Now everyone's being very discerning. You probably heard about the Great Resignation, and people are like, I want flexibility. I want a company that has great core values. I want, the employees are kind of in the driver's seat right now. So think about what is your value proposition and what do you offer a new employee? Because there is a bit of sales now in recruiting employees. It's not just you being discerning and picking the right one. It's also selling what you see as the value and the future of your company. So that's hard sometimes for hiring managers and employers to think about these days. But I think if you spend a little time there before you start interviewing candidates, that's probably another thing to think about and be prepared to talk with candidates about. I also think, if you think about adding staff as marketing your business, right? So are the people that you're going to add to your business, are they going to add and complement the growth of your organization? I think people get caught up in the legalities of recruitment, but really it's just another form of sales, if you think about it. And finding people that can mesh with either you, if you're the sole employee right now, or your other employees, and how you scale that as you grow. So let me stop there for a minute and just see if anyone has any questions related to that or more granular things that we can talk about, or otherwise I'll keep going.
Absolutely. And thank you, Kelly. I've been taking notes on this. This is such good information. One question that's come up is, so you've got a job description, you've got an idea of what you're looking for. Where's the best place to look? Do you go to LinkedIn? Is it word of mouth? Do you hire a recruiter? Like what are the next steps once you've got that job description?
That's a great question. And I think it's going to be different for everybody, but generally I would say I would start in two places. I would start with word of mouth, right? There's so many avenues, Venture Center's one, Little Rock Power Women on Facebook, Leadership for Women Foundation, the Nest. There's all these organizations popping up. And I know you all are doing a good job in trying to get with these groups and help present different options for people. And so I think putting it out there, what job you have open on social media. So Facebook, particularly LinkedIn. The other thing that most people don't think about with LinkedIn, but organizations do it all the time. You can just search. Let's say you're looking for an accountant. Let's take an easy one. Let's say you're looking for an accountant. You can search, instead of searching for a person, you can search for trades. So you could say accountant, Little Rock, Arkansas. And anybody in your second or third, network will pop up, and you can start looking at people that way, and you can message people. So just having an individual LinkedIn account is a way to go. Or you could put out to your network, hey, I'm looking for an accountant who knows somebody. In HR, we do that all the time. I have a group of HR professionals, and I see a couple of them on this call actually, and we will say, hey, I'm looking for this. Does anyone know anybody? Or here, I know somebody who's looking for a job. They're great, that kind of thing. So definitely lean on your network. But also you can use LinkedIn. I think if it's a specialized position, sometimes it does benefit you to use a recruiter. But I think in most startup businesses, I think you can start by utilizing your own network and looking on LinkedIn and reaching out that way. And I've talked to some small business owners who, they have better luck with that than, let's say, buying a posting to put, which you could do on Monster LinkedIn, and it gets, it'll get widely viewed. But or even your website. If you have a website, people know about your website, and you're posting out there a lot on social media and things like that. That is another way. I mean, we post on the Southwest Power Pool Facebook page a lot if we're looking for new people, and then I'll get my managers to share that, ask them specifically, hey, will you share this with your network? And we found quite a few employees that way as well. Great question.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question kind of takes a step back and goes to the job description. As entrepreneurs, we're wearing multiple hats. We're doing it all ourselves, especially if we're a solo entrepreneur, and you realize you need more people. That job description, your mind is kind of all over the place as far as what your needs are. What are your tips on defining what those needs are if you're looking for flexibility and that willingness to wear multiple hats? What's that stuff that you include in that job description?
That's a great question. I think I'd start with in thinking about a job description, something simple, right? So what's the purpose of the job? A brief summary on that. So think about that. What are the actual responsibilities of the job? The big sort of areas of responsibility. And then what is the knowledge, skills, and abilities needed, right? So for example, a hot topic right now is, do we need a college degree for a job? There's probably a lot of jobs that we say we want a college degree, but we really don't need that. So generally, last 5 years, most of the companies I've worked for have said combination of, you can either have a degree or or experience, or a combination, depending on how many years of experience. So think about how much experience you really need. And then some people then also add the competencies that you mentioned, Ashley. So like, are you looking for someone who's a self-starter? Are you looking for someone who's very detail oriented? Those competencies, which are more the how you do it, the what is the work they're going to be doing? What software programs do they need to know? What are your non-negotiables? So anybody can create a very kind of simplistic job description, but think about those 4 areas. And I think that's the right, that'll start getting you there. And then looking for some of the things that you mentioned, the competencies, I think you have to do that in the interview process.
Great advice there. How do you analyze the ability to afford staff and benefits?
Okay, so it is a challenge, and I have never had that entrepreneurial spirit. I've always wanted to help, businesses, but I've never had the courage, I think, to go out there and create it all from scratch. So kudos to everyone on the call. It's hard I think it depends on your industry and when to know when you need help. So if you're working, 80 hours a week, if you're feeling like things are falling between the cracks, do you start with a part-time person? Do you say this is part-time and it goes full-time? Those are kind of decisions that you have to make. Benefits are also a challenge But a lot of times people, I think entrepreneurs are a little afraid when they're trying to add people like, well, we don't have a lot of benefits. I think the two biggest things that employees are looking for in today's world, I'll give you three. Flexibility. So when do I have to do the work? So if you can be flexible about, hey, you could take your child to school and then you could start at 9, you could leave at 2 to go pick up a child and you can work till 7, or I don't care at all, as long as you get this work done in a set period of time. Not everybody can do that, but think about flexibility. Think about challenging work. You want someone who maybe has some experience in that work, but would really see your opportunity as a challenge, not only to learn more, but to grow. And then the third thing that I think everyone's looking for right now is purpose. And what I mean by that is they want to understand the value proposition of your organization, right? Is it in every area of interest for them? Is it something that's helping the community? Is it, a growth opportunity where, you're going to want to sell that in 10 years? Is it a service? Is it, those kinds of things? What's your value proposition as an organization? And people care about that. So I'd say those are the three things. And I can't really tell you individually about that, but people will forgo benefits if they feel like they've got flexibility, meaning in their work and purpose. And I think we're really seeing that today with people doing a lot of, I call it the side hustle, right? They've got something on the side that they really like to do, and they're trying to cultivate that maybe even to something, as a full-time job. So maybe they'd want to do that with you as well, cultivate that and grow. I don't know if that answered your question, Ashley.
I think it did. We'll make sure that the person that asked it gives us a thumbs up, but we'll move on because we've got several questions coming through. This is great information. So you've mentioned value proposition a few times. Can you explore that a little bit and explain what that is?
Yeah, and I think it's different. It's different for an entrepreneur related to the market, whatever your market is, and your employees. But they're very tied together. So in the way that you've thought about your business plan and growing your business, think about a value proposition as it relates to the culture of your organization, or what you want that culture to be when you start adding employees, right? So let's say you want it to be, a fun environment, or you want it to be a go entrepreneurial environment, or so spend some time thinking about what you value in your organization and what you want it to be so that you can articulate that in the interview. Because remember, now an interview with candidates is not just one way. You sell hey, you candidate, sell yourself to me. It's now you also selling yourself to the candidate. And I saw someone Kathleen posted, not having a lot of interest in the position that she's posted. And we're experiencing that as well. And asked about the salary range. I'm sort of torn about the salary range. I think that if you feel that you're willing to pay a little above market, whatever that is, and however we find that out, and we can talk about that later, but I would post it if you feel that's a real selling point. Otherwise, I think you want to go with the value of the job and what they're going to learn and what their opportunities would be. So if you feel like you're going to be a growing company, then you might say, entry-level position with room for growth, scaling quickly. There'll be lots of upside for promotions and things like that. Not necessarily in the ad, but in an interview. But I think that's where you have to take it. It doesn't hurt, though, to post a salary range. Although I found when you post a salary range, everybody who sees a salary range would want that very top number that you posted. I mean, they're just going to want that. So you have to be articulate about and be clear about what would be a lower end range skill that you need and what would be the higher range and that you would pay. But you can have those discussions with candidates. I mean, they're used to asking about that. And but there's a lot of talk about that right now. So I think you just have to do what's best based on whether you think you're where you're at in the pay range for the market.
That is a good point. Definitely be careful on that high end. Why wouldn't you go for the higher number, right? That makes sense to be able to defend that.
Yeah.
How do you address background checks?
Yeah, so background checks I think are pretty challenging for young new companies, right? Because I will say that I've been lucky in that I've always worked for organizations where we actually contracted, through our in our case our applicant tracking system, we've contracted with vendors to do that for us. So for example, if you have ADP and you use them for payroll or UKG or Paylocity, you can usually contract with a background check vendor, and they'll check things like social security numbers, make sure it's not a duplicate. They'll check criminal background. They'll check education. They'll check that kind of stuff. If you don't have the resources to do that, and a lot of times you're just starting with one or two employees, why would you? Why would you do that? You can check. You can have people check, or you can check college degrees. You can ask for copies of that. You can check locally, do background checks. There's ways to do that. You can check on some of those things yourself. You can check references to check, dates of employment and things like that. It takes a little bit more work, but you can do that. And usually if you've got an application form, whether that's paper or you do that online, and you can find ways to create just a boilerplate one of those, and have an applicant sign that saying that you have the ability to check those things, you probably should do that. Yes.
Mm-hmm. At what point should, this person asks, at what point should I go from contractors to employees? Is there a way to be sure that the risk of going full-time business will pay off?
Whew, that's a loaded question too, right? So I think, as a larger organization, when we have contractors and we have employees, how we look at it is if a contractor has a specialized skill that we want to bring in, and we see that may be a short-term need. Now that could be a week, a month, 6 months, or a year, but we don't see that being an ongoing need. We'll keep that as a contractor, even though that may be more expensive. I think when you're trying to debate when to convert to an employee, though, in a small business, you have to ask yourself, do you see continued growth in that area? Do you see a continued need for that employee? Then generally it's probably better, and you can convert that employee to that contractor to employee, probably better. If you're providing a lot of direction to that contractor and you're giving them space and equipment and resources, they're probably not a contractor. They're really, honestly, already probably considered an employee, and that could be a IRS flag. So be careful with that. But generally, I think it's when it's ongoing and you're providing a lot of specific company, your individual company directed resources and time and attention now in with that contractor. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And this question sort of builds off that contractor employee question. What options are there for funding a first hire? She's facing sort of a chicken versus the egg situation, not having too much to work for yourself before hiring, but having enough to support that hire.
Yeah, and I saw that Glenda posted in the chat. Glenda, who's an HR consultant, by the way, so she and has a lot of small business clients. So I'll put a plug there in for Glenda, because there are a lot of programs in the government, lots of tax credits, lots of programs. I'm not familiar with those since I'm working for a large employer, but definitely in the Small Business Administration website, there's some other resources there. Check that out, because you could get some support there. You could also get rebates, as Glenn said, tax incentives. So check that out. I think that the challenge is when to add that first one or two in looking at your revenue projections and when you feel like you could sustain that, right? And if you think, depending on which function you're adding, that will just grow over time versus maybe more of a short-term need when you might try to get a contractor, or you might just try to purchase a service. And that's kind of hard to do. I do understand that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's say we've found a couple of candidates that we want to interview. Can you talk us through what that interview process could potentially look like, as far as, maybe not necessarily what questions to ask, but how many times do you interview them before the offer, and certain other aspects of the process?
All right. So I think you should should interview, let's talk about how many times. I think you should at least interview a candidate twice. And here's my sort of bias on that. I think you want to see, are they going to show up on time consistently? So at least 2 different times. Let's try that, right? Are they on time? It gives you an opportunity to interact with them 2 different times in different ways. Maybe you have different, maybe if you do have other staff members you want to participate, you include them as well. So I always think at least 2 times to interview a candidate. I think the other thing is timely, right? So when you get candidates or you get a referral or, someone shoots you a resume, try to schedule it as quickly as possible. Those candidates aren't going to be in the market that long. And they, candidates are very impatient these days, right? It's a candidate market. So they're like, nope, we're not waiting around for you. We're gone. So responsiveness is really important, setting them up, vetting them. Even if, somebody refers someone to you and you don't think they're qualified, try to network with them, tell them what you're looking for. Maybe they know somebody else. It's tough, but people understand if you're saying, you're not exactly the right fit for me, but try to respond back to those who do apply. Secondly, I would say, you want to have, I always suggest that you have pre-prepared questions. And you don't have to be an HR professional. You don't have to work in a large company to have what I call a, kind of prepared, standardized interview. And generally, I'll give you the first couple of questions that I have always used. First of all, is can you tell me a little bit about your background and your resume and your work history? Let them open-ended. You do that for a couple of reasons. Make them less nervous, see what they tell you, see how long they talk, see when they start, see when they stop, right? Then you're going to ask them, what made you interested? Why did you decide to apply for my job? Or what made you reach out to me? Why are you interested in my job? See what they say to you, right? And then if they're currently working somewhere else, I said, what would make you consider leaving that employer? What's made you kind of be ready for a new opportunity? I always ask those 3 questions. And then depending on what I'm recruiting for, so go back to my example of an accountant, I would say, talk to me about, you've walked me through your resume. Tell me a little bit more specifically about this company and what type of accounting work you did there, right? Because you're listening for the things that you want in your company, right? And what you need done. If you need somebody so those are the more technical questions, right? Then you're going to want to look at more competency-based questions. So for example, let's say you want someone to be very independent. You might say something like, describe for me a time where you took a project and ran with it, didn't get a lot of direction. How did it go? What was it? Tell me what happened. And you can Google all day long behavioral interview questions for any topic you want. So if you're like, I want someone who's detail-oriented, boom, Google some questions on detail orientation. It'll be there for you. But the key to that, I think, is to create a standardized interview and ask every candidate those same questions. Now, you're not going to ask the same follow-up questions, but the same initial questions so that you compare apples to oranges and that apples to apples. You don't want a candidate who is just high verbal, great communicator to sort of sweep you off your feet. You want to compare the information that they give you. So I always tell people, have an actual interview list of questions, ask them all. And then for some people, you can ask follow-up questions that are different because based on what they say, but that's fine. And then at the end, always, always, always ask a candidate, what questions do you have for me? And I will give my biggest bias of all. If they have no questions for you, that is probably not someone you want to hire. Like I tell everybody when I do a lot of mock interviews with college students and helping people looking for jobs, and I'll say, have questions, right? Talk to them. If nothing else, why are you looking to hire this position? Was there someone in this role before me? What would an ideal person in this job look like? Whatever it is, their questions tell you a lot about them. The other question some people ask, if you want to be, know how prepared they are, is tell me what you know about my organization, right? Tell me what you know about us. And if they don't know a lot, that could or could not, maybe, just depends, say something about how prepared or how interested they are for your role. So
Very good point on that. Again, if anybody has any other questions as far as hiring those first few employees, go ahead and throw that in the chat or the Q&A. Let's move on to that onboarding process. So you're starting to bring people on. How do you create that consistency in onboarding people and setting them up for success?
That's another really important area. And so I'm going to give you two examples. So my previous position, my previous company that I was at was Delta Dental of Arkansas. And Delta Dental is a national brand, right? And so we had great recognition in the community. We have Delta Dental had a foundation. 60% of employers in Arkansas have Delta Dental insurance. So we had great applicant flow. So we had lots and lots of applicants. We also had applied to be best places to work, had won that award 9 years in a row. Everybody mentioned that. So any sort of press you can get about your organization and it being great to work for, candidates see that as well. And one of the things we prided ourselves on was the orientation process. So what we did there, and now at Southwest Power Pool, it's even more extensive. Once we made a hire, we would send not just an offer letter, we'd send a box of things to that employee. So we would say, welcome to the team. Here's a Delta Dental t-shirt. Here's a mug. We can't wait to see you in a couple weeks. So another thing we would do is send a note sometimes we did this different times, to send a note to their family. We're so excited that you're now, because your spouse or whatever is part of our family, we're so excited that you're joining our family. We would also then on their first day, so the first day, we would spend some time, and even a small organization can do this, right? And Delta Dental was about 200 employees. We would say, here's what our mission is. Here's our vision. Here's our core values. Here's how you fit in, right? And we'd like you to take a couple classes. And so we would have some classes on our organizational structure. We'd have some classes on some of our products. So I really urge people, if you're a very small company, to think about the experience for the new employee. What do you need to tell them? How do you need to show them your business plan? Who do you need to introduce them to? How do you need to tell them what your marketing plan is, or who your customer base is? And just kind of think about that ahead of time. And over the first couple weeks, have a plan, set times, whatever it is, to give them that information. So at Southwest Power Pool, we actually have the first 3 months, we're doing classes about all of our different departments and what they do. And we have a strategic plan. So we talk about that. We talk about our culture and our history. We have a class on communication, on how we communicate. And then in the second half of their first year, we have some additional classes like and we also talk about here's how we decided what to pay you, and here's how we do performance management. And then we start talking about here's how we have career development, and here's here's what we do, and here's what we're doing in the future. And so we have like phases of orientation. But no matter your size, just I think ahead of time, kind of plan out from an experience standpoint what you want that employee to know, and carve that out from just. And if you have a couple employees, assign them a buddy or a mentor or an ambassador or whatever you call it, to show them the ropes, or someone they can go ask questions to. A lot of times people don't want to go to their new boss and ask them. They might want to ask a peer. So if you are a little bit bigger and you can assign somebody to do that, that's also a great thing. Where are the local restaurants? Where are the restrooms? All those kinds of things. So some really practical things that you think, oh yeah, where's my computer? Have that cubicle office set up before they start, right? You're ready for them. You're ready for them to start. You're welcoming. If they're going to be virtual, ship their computer to their home, whatever that is. On their first day, take them to lunch, introduce them to everybody. Put some, again, treat them like, in a way, a client, right? You want them to become part of your team and understand what your mission is as an organization. So I
think that's really good. And too, something else that just came to mind as entrepreneurs, in these roles, oftentimes they are wearing multiple hats. And when they have someone brought in new to the organization, they're just excited to give them all the things that they need to do and to help and to try to balance that load. With that in mind, how do you balance that onboarding process and making sure they're comfortable with the space and understanding the flow of things, but also getting the work done that needs to be done? How do you balance that when you've just got a small team?
Yeah, I think that's really hard. And so I think that's why it's helpful to plan it ahead of time and space it out over time, right? So you might just decide an hour a week. Hey, we're going to talk about our business plan next Tuesday. But in the meantime, read these brochures or understand what we do, or we'll tell you whatever. And then we're going to talk to you about who our biggest customers are, who our clients are, or how we market. We're going to do that next Thursday. So it doesn't have to be all in the first day, week, month, but be planful. And so plan out ahead and do it before they start. So you kind of think, okay, now what would they need to know? What do I want them to know? And then go that route. I don't think it has to be extensive. I think you can say, okay, today we're going to spend maybe 30 minutes talking about business plan. Then you're going to go sit with, Bill, and he's going to walk you through some of the main responsibilities. Then I'm going to have you talk to so-and-so and just hear what they do. Just mix it up. It's really more just about planning than it is a lot of time, I think.
I agree with that. And thanks for sharing that. Glenda looks like she just dropped some information there. We've got Glenda and Beverly dropping some really good information there in the chat. So thanks to them for doing so, and encourage everybody to check that out and continue to ask these questions. They are really, really good questions.
They're great.
Okay, so we've talked about bringing new employees on, that onboarding process. Now we've built a team. How do you evaluate that performance? How do you make sure KPIs, or talk about KPIs, and how do you make sure they're hitting those targets?
Okay, yeah. So we're talking. I guess we're talking about the whole life cycle of an employee today, right? So that's good. So, the other thing that I think we're doing a good job at my new company, we're really focusing on it, is performance management. We've revamped our performance review process, and in a highly technical company, they know what work needs to be done. But I was finding when I joined them about 6 months ago that we weren't really clear what the objectives are. We just had so much work. So we revamped our performance management to be, it has 3 parts to it. So our performance reviews are in January and February. We have our management team setting goals. And so how we've talked about that is, we have a strategic plan that is a kind of a 1, 3, and 5 year horizon. And so we sort of back into that and we say, what are our biggest initiatives of an organization in 2022, right? Then each department says, okay, I'm going to create, we give them a template if they want it, but they'll have to. What is your department's role in that, right? What are they doing? So for a smaller company, you may only have like 2 or 3 different areas. So what is the overall goal of the company, and what do you want those individual teams or areas to do? And then what do you want the individual to do? So it starts for us, it's a calendar year. So we start in January and we set goals. And those are SMART goals, right? You've probably heard that term: specific, measurable, actionable. What's the R? I always forget the R. And then time driven. I don't know, I'll think of it. And to help an employee understand, here's what my job is. So let's say you were going to hire an HR professional, and main thing they're going to be doing is hiring people. You might want to say, okay, for 2022, we expect if we hit our targets, if we grow, we're going to add 5 employees. So want you to hire 5 employees by mid 2022 or whatever that is. So you set the objectives. The other part of our performance review is so you've got the goals, and we rate those individually at the end of the year. And then we have competencies. So you've got the what, which is what you're doing, and then the how, which is the competency. So those are things like communication, relationships, attention to detail, whatever the competencies you want, either for your organization as a whole. We tend to use we have core accountabilities, core competencies for our employees that are everybody in the whole company has the same four. And then if you're on the technical side, you have like business acumen and knowing the technical part of your job. And then if you're a leader, you have managing people as an additional competency. But so you have the business goals, you have the competencies, and then you just have a rating that you rate them on. And so, you really have to have good objectives before you create the KPIs. But the key performance indicators are how you're going to measure those objectives. And so you don't need, a fancy system. You don't need a fancy form. I think it's really as simple as that.
And that makes a lot of sense. We do have about 14 minutes left here. We want to make sure we answer everyone's questions. So be sure to drop those in the chat. You can raise your hand and ask your question aloud, or you can ask that question in the Q&A feature while we're waiting on some more of those questions to come in. Kelly, is there anything else you'd like to touch on that we haven't done so far?
Yeah, thanks to Sylvia, who the R stands for realistic. So thank you for that, Sylvia. I think that the one thing I would encourage a small business owner to think about as your secret weapon is really what your culture is, what you want your organization to be. How do you want your employees to add value to your culture and add value to the mission of your organization, right? How do you want people to perceive your organization? How do you spend some time thinking about not just the business metrics, but how that is perceived by others and what you want your core values to be. And, an advantage that I've had working for a couple not-for-profits, because Southwest Power Pool is a not-for-profit, Delta Dental is a not-for-profit, in that they're giving back to kind of their members and what they're doing, is really clear line of sight between the vision and the mission and then values. So at Delta Dental, the mission was to provide oral care to all Arkansans. So that was the goal at Delta Dental. At Southwest Power Pool, is to economically keep the lights on, right? And work with our partners to do that. So knowing what that is, the smaller you are when you start that, the more that adds value, because people understand what they're working towards. I'd really encourage that, because it helps you not only grow your business, but it also helps you keep your employees too. So.
Mm-hmm. And this has been really insightful. This is one of those webinars that we've done that you can always go back to. This is information that's relevant, today and 5 years down the road too. So I want to remind everyone that this is recorded. It's also on our Facebook page. And so whenever you need to come back to this, I know several people likely will, and feel free to share it with the masses. Want to make sure that everyone knows that's available as well. In talking about the KPI piece of it and measuring and making sure your employees are checking those boxes, hitting those targets, or getting results, and also are realizing that value within the organization, how often would you suggest measuring those things? Is it weekly? Is it something you do every week? Is it monthly, quarterly? What does that process look like?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting question, because I think we generally will tell our management team, you should be checking in with your employees, having a monthly one-on-one meeting, at least once a month. I actually, with my people, do a weekly check-in, but I'm not always talking about, those objectives. Maybe every 3 meetings, we'll pull out the objectives and see where we're at on things. But I am meeting with my team weekly. I meet with each of them for an hour, and it's more about checking in on just day-to-day work, but it's also, what do you need from me? What roadblocks can I clear out of your way? How are you feeling? What do you need to know? What do what's going on? Just touching base, right? And because a performance review at the end of the year is really not valuable in that. It's more of just a kind of a crystallization of what you've done and confirmation of that. The value of it is keeping it alive every month by just talking about those objectives. And if they change, you change them. But just talking about those regularly and making sure that you're on the same page about what those mean and how they're doing and what do they need to help get them done. Is there something happening that we have to cancel that and do something else? Those kinds of things. So I think that's the value. And Generation Z, the new generation hitting the workforce now, lots like millennials, I think, want lots of communication. And they don't want to be managed, they want to be coached, which is a subtle distinction, right? How can I help you have your fullest potential versus here's how you need to do that, right? And so I think there's a lot of, and then a performance review is just really a confirmation of that at the end of the year and helps you kind of evaluate, looking back, how someone did and what they might need to do when you start setting the goals again in January.
And one other thing that has just come up, we may not end on this, we may want to end on a positive, but something else that's come up is if you're an entrepreneur and you're hiring people, that means you might also find yourself in a position of letting go or firing people. And you made a good point about having, and I think I might be speaking ahead of you a little bit, but relating it to those values. That way it's based on facts and not personal. Explain how to navigate that if you find yourself in a position of having to let someone go.
Yeah, and I think I will tell you that's a great topic for a whole other session because it's practical, right? And you don't want to cause your business to have bad press or a lawsuit or something like that. So how to do that in the best way, right? How to do that. So here's what I'll say generally about that is, and it's hard, but I would say the sooner you realize you're having a problem, don't explain it away, don't try to ignore it, address it, but address it in a positive way. I think we're having some problems here. Here's the expectation. Here's what I want you to do. That's not happening. Tell me about that, right? That's when it's about maybe somebody not getting it or, they're too slow or, those are things you have to think about. But generally, I'll tell you, cut your losses early. I always tell my managers, if we made a bad hire, let's fix it within 90 days. Why just keep trying, right? But generally after 90 days, let me just say this, generally after 90 days, if you're having a problem with somebody, you want to have at least a couple conversations where you're trying to figure out what's going wrong. You're trying to get them on the right track, trying to give them resources to get them back up to speed, right? Before you make a decision to terminate, right? Now, that's not relative if they're not coming to work or there's policy violations or anything like that. But I mean in performance, be really sure that you're both clear on what the expectations are, and then give them a couple chances to improve before taking action. And then at least here's what I always say with performance reviews and termination: never, ever, ever should it be a surprise. That's when things go wrong for you as an employer, is when you were like, I can't deal with it. I'm just gonna terminate him. I've made my mind up. When you and the employer aren't in the same place about what's going to be happening soon. So, I'm happy to offer advice because that's one of the trickiest areas for a young business is when you hire someone and you realize, oops, that's the wrong person. How do I exit that person with dignity for me and for them, and no liability or issues for me on my side? It's tough sometimes.
Absolutely. And thanks for responding to that. You make a good point. This could be a topic for a whole other webinar or meeting or talking, because this is something that may come up quite a bit. And I also want to remind everyone too, I believe if I set it up correctly, you will receive a survey after this presentation. And don't hate me. I try to keep it as simple as possible, but we truly want to know what you want to hear about next. And we can stay in this sort of HR and hiring vein if you want to learn more and take a deeper dive into that. Or if it's another topic that maybe you've thought about, please send us your ideas if you're watching this and let us know. You can send those through the survey, or you can email me directly, Ashley@venturecenter.co. because this is about our entrepreneurs, and we want to make sure your questions are being answered and that we're actually, truly supporting you and your businesses. So with that, if there are no other questions, and also kudos to Beverly and there was someone else, Beverly and Glenda. Yes, my goodness. Thank you guys for helping us in the chat. This has been super, super helpful. And again, this is recorded. You can always come back to it. If you continue to have questions, please send those to me. We can get those answered. Otherwise, we want to thank our guest today, Ms. Kelly Carney with Southwest Power Pool. This has been a wealth of information, lots of good pieces that you can always come back to. And again, February 9th, we have another program coming up. That's a fireside chat with Miss Olivia Farrell. We've also got our mentorship program that's going. So if you are an entrepreneur here in the state that's looking for some guidance in any industry, you're more than welcome to apply there. You can also, if you are a business owner looking to give back and support those entrepreneurs here that are looking for that guidance, you can apply to be a mentor in that program as well. Again, thank you to our sponsors, Frost Accounting Firm, the Little Rock Regional Chamber, Simmons Bank, Wright Lindsay Jennings. And again, thank you to everyone for watching. Thanks again to Kelly. We hope you found this valuable and you'll all attend some of our future programs. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome. Great talk. Thanks.